This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is July 16th, 2026.
I'm Scott Lennebaum.
And I'm Ian Bushfield, and we're back from our summer hiatus. I traveled the mountain passes in an EV, pulling our little trailer. Everything went great on the technical side. Health-wise, that diarrhea bug that's going around the States, I don't know if that's what we got, but everyone in the trailer had a rough 24 hours, sequential, or like 12 hours, kind of sequentially though. So there was always like 3 healthy people. That sucked, but everything else was really good. Shout out to family and in-laws for support during those trying times. How was your break?
Less eventful than that, thankfully.
Things were thankfully pretty quiet politically.
Most part. There was a couple big things that happened surprisingly the week of the long weekend.
Yeah, but we got lots we can cover then today as we catch up on how things have been going as the summer has gotten underway. Blue skies here in BC, thankfully, still not so much in Eastern Canada. But we do have to talk about the floor crossing that shook the province. The provincial Conservatives are shaking up their leadership. EB is inking a pipeline deal and kind of a floor crossing to the Senate in Ottawa as Carney shakes up how Senate appointments are being made. Join the Slack at patreon.com/politicos to keep up with the conversation even when we are on vacation. Let's start here in BC. So, Penticton Summerland MLA Amelia Boultby has officially joined the BCNDP caucus. She had been sitting as an independent after leaving the Conservatives. And this, is a good news day for David Eby as his majority goes from precarious to someone can be sick one day.
Slightly less precarious.
Yes.
And also, it's any day where you get a floor crosser is a pretty good day for the party receiving them.
Yeah, typically. You always get the usual stories of local residents are mixed on reactions because that's how people are. Some people voted for her, some people voted for her party, some people voted against her. I don't think I've ever seen a floor crosser story where everyone in the riding goes, that was a good choice. It's partisan politics. There's going to be a divide in that. So that's all fine. It's not totally unexpected. Boultby had voted with the NDP and as an independent was like a moderate voice and didn't seem as comfortable with where the Conservatives, especially now, are versus like the broader tent under David Eby's NDP. So that all makes sense. I think the most interesting thing comes from this editorial in Info News, one of the Okanagan news sites, written by editor Marshall Joan, that says, we need to talk about Amelia Boultby with some allegations being dropped about her.
Yeah, that's one way to put it. At first, I was a little skeptical of the story because it starts out with, we can't get really many people to go on the record, and then the links comment. It's quite something.
Yeah, so he kind of describes a pattern of people describing her as a bully or being scared of her, or and he goes on later in the article to talk about a number of people who have blocked her on social media due to just negative interactions. There's some links to tweets she's posted reacting to other people, like she goes after Dan Ashton, who in theory was like a mentor to her at some points, but here she's like, they call you Do Nothing Dan. And it's just like needlessly hostile. Jones recounts how he was critical of Boultby in one editorial and he says she responded by demanding the paper remove a photo that they'd used that was, I don't know if it's the photo I would have used in an article about her. It shows her on a boat in a swimsuit, not like a revealing swimsuit, but still like she's a politician. You didn't probably need to use that one. But then I guess there's this long chain of texts calling the editor a troll, obnoxious, stupid, sexist pig, and nuts, where she's also threatening to get female parliamentarians involved in all the women's groups. Complaints are made to Info News about Jones. Further complaints, this gets forwarded to like Boltby Lawyers Up, and further complaints are made to Info News, and he's just kind of running through this as like...
Read it between the lines. This was a lawyer already on retainer.
There's a bunch of other allegations of different people who've run across Boltby, including like Penticton Council had a dust up with her at different times. I'm just going to put the link in the show notes because it's quite the read. I had skimmed it earlier in the week, and then I was just going through it this evening and like, oh shit, this is a lot here. Suffice it to say, I think she's potentially quite the liability for the party.
Yeah, caucus management's going to be an interesting challenge going forward, and yeah, wouldn't surprise me based off this to see some kind of eruption pop up in between now and the next election.
Like, the charitable take for her in my read of this is she's the kind of person who maybe has points and is treated unfairly at times, but the reactions, like, she's too terminally online. She's commenting in Facebook groups, she's on X, she's just posting too much, reacting too strongly, and just, especially as a public figure, as a politician, you should not be going after journalists. Just as a rule, even if the journalist is an asshole. I don't know if Marshall Jones is an asshole. I tried to look at some of his past stuff. He seems kind of cool, honestly, by some of the stuff he's written, but I don't know what he's like in person. I don't know if Boltby has a point, but like, this doesn't work well for her. And it suggests, a big red flag that hopefully the NDP knows what they just got. And I guess the bigger question is, what happens in the next election? Do they hope she runs again under their flag?
I mean, she's an incumbent MLA. Like, it's awkward if you aren't running them.
Yeah.
Unless they like decide they're leaving politics, which
I
don't know, maybe, but I could also see her wanting to stick around.
Yeah, and Penticton Summerland did actually go pretty close. I think she only won by a couple hundred votes last time, so I see, like, electorally the argument for running her again. She knows the area, she's got some ground game. I also see, like, maybe she's liability and maybe running someone else and just having a fresh slate, but it's a more interesting story than simply a floor crossing. I did look historically. The BCNDP has at least once previously accepted a floor crosser, and that was in 1995 or 96, and it was Gordon Wilson, who was the former leader of the BC Liberals before Gordon Campbell.
This is amazing. But I also like, doesn't that kind of show the whole NDP's holier than thou? We don't accept floor crossers because they need to, be elected by the people as in the party they're going to be representing. Kind of a bunch of BS.
Well, that's a federal policy that applies when they are in third-party status.
Like, they're the same party. Like, if you want all the benefits of being one party federally and provincially, you also do have to accept the fact that people are going to see them as one party and expect them to hold to the same principles on there. That sort of thing. And I think it more shows that, like, the federal position is less one of principle and more one of trying to, make something positive out of the fact that nobody ever wants to join them.
It's a principle of convenience, we could call it.
I mean, it's not really a principle at that point.
The Alberta NDP has accepted floor crossers in the past. I'm not sure about Manitoba, Saskatchewan, or Ontario, where the NDP has had significant numbers in the past. Or I guess Nova Scotia has also formed government. But yeah, at least a couple provincial parties have. done so. For the Conservatives' part, they have officially announced who their shadow cabinet is. That's the framing they're using in their leadership team. They have named Heather Maws as interim leader of official opposition and critic for childcare and early childhood education, because their caucus is such that everyone's got to have 1 to 2 roles. And everyone did, in fact, as far as I can tell, I didn't verify this 100%, everyone did get a role, it looks like. But yeah, Heather Maws is quite the choice, I think, for what they call interim leader of the official opposition. Friend of the pod, Ryan Clayton, has a post about how that's not a real title. It's just leader of the official opposition, and the BCNDP even formally recognized Shirley Bond as leader of the opposition, even though she served when Kevin Falcon hadn't gotten a seat yet.
I mean, sure, but like, I also think we call it that, like, seems pretty inconsequential.
I think the thing was Shirley Bond engendered a lot of like respect across party lines for the work she did as leader of the opposition at that point. And I don't expect to see the same from Heather Maws based on her political career for now. What do you know about Heather Maws?
Not very much, actually.
Okay, she was a former trustee with the Chilliwack School Board. I was going to say until the election, but she actually continued after the election, and she was one of those MLAs that the NDP basically like forced to resign. She may have actually resigned voluntarily before it, but the NDP started calling out a number of Conservative MLAs who were elected and maintained their lower level offices, whether that was city council or school board. She was a school trustee from 2008 to 2024, being one of the longest serving school trustees there. She was always kind of the strong conservative. She didn't like the way sex ed was taught in the classroom. She wanted the book All Boys Aren't Blue, one of those LGBT books, pulled from libraries. She came into controversy with her own school board on multiple occasions, getting censured 3 times in 2023 and 2024 over various different code of conduct things and an alleged breach of confidentiality guidelines, which were never really disclosed what happened. So she comes from the culture war side, to put it short. And it seems like that's fitting with who Carrie Lynn Findlay was. And I think if you look across the main leadership team, she announced kind of the core House leadership. It is the social conservatives ascendant in the party.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably a fair assessment on how these are divided up. On the one of the censure, I saw the Wikipedia said that she censored for posting an article critical of the school. Would you want to happen to know like the story behind that? Would you? Because these are one of the ones where like some of those codes of conduct seem to be like a little too restrictive on like the elected's ability to like really be critical of the work of what happens in their municipality or school board or whatever. But without knowing what was actually in the article, it's hard to get an real assessment of that.
I don't recall offhand. I know like she, I think, was generally critical of SOGI issues, and especially I think as the Chilliwack School Board started to become more progressive, and she was like one of the last holdouts, even after Barry Neufeld lost his seat there, I think. She was one of the last holdouts for the social conservative group there, and attacked. She reposted an article about a survey of students and their personal pronouns. I think there was some like anti-trans language in the description of the article, but I don't have it in front of me. I don't think it was simply just sharing an article. It was a toxic environment between her and the rest of the board that was trying to continue to promote a safe. This is a board that's not had a great 20 years.
Yeah, the Chilliwack one's one of like the more famous boards for being on the socially conservative side. and
But it
causing
has swung,
controversies.
right? Yeah, it did swing an election or two ago.
Historically.
Yeah.
That's Chilliwack and Abbotsford are kind of the two places you hear it from the most.
Yeah, for sure. Moz was also the one who invited ARPA, the Association for Reform Political Action, I believe, to do a booth in the legislature that drew a lot of condemnation from the BCNDP and even parts of the Conservative Party, although other parts were like cheering it on. And so the culture war stuff is where they're putting their energy rather than... I mean, I think the one moderate who got Deputy House Leader was Lauren Dorkson. I don't even know how moderate he was, but I think he had endorsed one of the other candidates for the leader. I'm so out of it, Scott. Dorkson dates back to some of the BC Liberal days too, but we'll see. We'll see when the legislature returns how this slightly smaller caucus does. And I don't know, maybe they bring Tara Armstrong and or Dallas Brody back into the fold. Although I was seeing Angelo Isidoro get into Twitter spats with Dallas Brody over 15-minute cities. Because
now I'm curious how that shook out. Like,
Dallas Brody's against them.
I mean, that's not surprising, but like also I would have kind of guessed Angelo Isidoro would not be like a big proponent of them.
I forget where I saw it, but it was it was funny. It was funny. I'm happy to let them fight.
Yeah, circling back to this shadow cabinet, several of the key portfolios also stay the same. See Gavin Dews, but still in economic development. Steve Truner still critic for Attorney General. So some shake-up, some people keeping their existing portfolios, not a complete rewrite of the entire critic portfolios.
Yeah, and like Trevor Halford is now critic for transit, so he's still got something prominent. John Rustad is critic for Treasury Board. Like I said, everyone got something in the end. I'm really curious to see how things come back in when the legislature returns and what attitudes we see between these people. I found the Isidoro tweet. Dallas Brody had talked about how she was speaking against the Villages plan in Vancouver and 15-minute cities. And Isidoro says, thank goodness we have the people advocating for the quote-unquote conservative position of driving 40 minutes to go to your local Walmart. What would we do? Interpreting walkable cities as scary 15-minute cities is the worst form of elite boomer who's addicted to Facebook syndrome. And like, God damn it, I don't want to agree with Angelo Isidoro, but
he's got a point on that one.
He nails it, damn it. So, conservative infighting is the thing we'll circle back to in a bit, but let's stick here in BC for a little bit. One of the other things that came up was a nurses' strike. The nurses voted pretty strongly that they were unhappy with the government's proposals, that I think even their union had said, let's take this deal, and the nurses themselves said, no, things are bad. That led to a nurse strike, which can't be like other strikes because even regardless of how you feel about essential services designations, like nurses are pretty clearly an essential service.
There's really no argument that you could get by without nurses showing up. Like, people would absolutely die.
Nevertheless, even just the threat of like reduced work to rule stuff led the province to move pretty quickly to bring in Vince Reddy, who's always at the ready to solve our labor disputes. And when he dies or retires, we're fucked. But he's still around.
Hopefully he has like a protege he's been training up.
Right. I hope he has like a child. Just, I'm not for dynasties, but this seems like a dynasty, something that we could have a dynasty for. The one person who can solve BC labor disputes. Anyway, he's mediating the nurses' dispute. No secret to anyone that nurses aren't happy and conditions in our hospitals aren't great. The nurses have a lot of demands, including things like there are 4,500 to 6,000 nursing positions that are left unfilled, and conditions aren't great, and a lot of nurses are thinking about quitting. That's true here.
Pretty bad workplace safety stuff too, with like violence against healthcare workers.
Yeah,
and stuff that's been ongoing for a while.
Yeah, and I'll put a link to an analysis piece from the Vancouver Sun that I thought was half decent. And they note like a lot of this predates the pandemic and was always kind of on the edge, and then COVID made everything worse and brought it all to the fore. And it's not all unique to BC. It's issues facing the entire country, but it's at the fore right now because of the strike. And so experts are kind of divided, and it seems like this is the situation where the NDP are not wanting to pay them any more than they paid anyone else, because if they do, Me Too clauses get triggered and all the other unions have to get paid a lot more, and that $13 billion deficit suddenly becomes a lot more. But at the same time, it's unclear how they solve this without more money. So
I think a lot of it goes to stuff that isn't necessarily direct salary boost so much as workplace condition spending. Because that, from what I remember, the coverage when the Justice strike first started was almost a bigger component of the union's demands than the salary was.
Yeah, and I think that was a thing with the teachers too, but...
Yeah, but like you said, there's a $13 billion deficit. Like, there's not a lot of spare fiscal capacity to do a lot of this stuff. And, healthcare already eats up like half the provincial budget. There's just big challenges with just keeping the lights on in the healthcare system that nobody really seems to have a handle on. And not only is just throw more money at the problem probably not going to solve it by itself, but that brings on a whole bunch of other problems in where do you get the money and how do you stop healthcare from outcompeting the other necessary government spending on a finite budget.
Well, that's where the fun Me Too clauses go. If you increase the healthcare funding here, you increase all the other aspects as well. So maybe it stays somewhat proportional. It's just a bigger pie.
Get a $30 billion deficit instead of a $13 billion one.
Well, good luck, Vince Reddy. The other kind of interesting announcement I saw from the government in the past couple of weeks was relating to the decommissioning that CN has announced of the Squamish to 100 Mile House rail corridor. This is a stretch of rail that's been used for freight, or actually hasn't been used for freight for a while, and is at a little bit of disrepair and needing tens of millions of investment, which is honestly a steal compared to most rail projects and infrastructure that gets talked about these days. But it's a bit of rail that, aside from the Squamish to Whistler bit, I really struggle to see business cases for. But it's kind of been left to the government to go, all right, well, what are we going to do with it? If CN's pulling out, is the rail just going to get fully decommissioned like Island Rail did? And we got the answer from the BC government finally that no, they plan to keep this in public hands and they want to see it used. And that's as far as we got.
Cool. How? Because, there's just like not a whole lot there in that stretch of the province. Like, you can't run a passenger line on that at all. There's no way the community stretching between Squamish and 100 Mile House generate nearly enough trips. And yeah, I'm sure there's some freight that would move in and out of that. And like, you push it past 100 Mile House, it goes up to Prince George and then connects into the line running between Prince Rupert and Edmonton. But like, how much freight's actually coming down through there to Vancouver versus, going out to Prince Rupert for the export stuff? And like, I don't know, maybe there's like a mine or two somewhere in the mountains in that stretch, but like, it's hard to make a compelling case just looking at it that, that's going to be a major transportation corridor, because I don't know, it's just not a lot there.
don't tell that to Gary Basalin of Columbia Rail from Washington State, whose company is looking at this and going, yeah, there's totally something we can do with that. And I mean, like, all power to him. I hope there is something someone can do with it. I don't want, like, yeah, especially the Squamish to Whistler thing, I think has a lot of potential. It is very weird to me, like, if you could connect Lillooet to, like, Cache Creek and the Kamloops line, follow that little highway there. It's just a tiny little stretch where the CN rail doesn't connect, but then you'd connect to, like, the real main lines.
Yeah, but those already feed into Vancouver, so, like, I'm not sure you'd get a lot of new traffic off of that.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the technical feasibility of this rail, but maybe there's a way you could make it a main passenger rail into Vancouver that then wouldn't be so bottlenecked by the freight coming through the Highway 1 corridor. But I don't know. There's potential here. This makes so much more sense than that stupid road project we talked about 3 weeks ago. That was real pie in the sky shit. This is tracks that are on the ground. They need a little bit of work, and then you could just put some trains on them. Probably not fast trains, unfortunately.
No, the rail. I don't know if stretch past Whistler's Light, but if you ever drive to see the sky, you look down at the train track that runs parallel to that. That thing's pretty curvy and not ideal for any real speed in a lot of stretches on that. So I think even if you were to do Vancouver to Whistler ski train kind of deal, you'd probably want to do a fair bit of corridor improvements just to be able to get the running speed up on that thing, which, I hope they do. Now, the main use for this track I can see is build it out like a Southwest BC regional rail system, which, like, we should do, and ideally would connect through the Lower Mainland and up to Whistler. But I just see less of a benefit pushing it past Whistler.
Make it a housing plan and, like, develop new towns up there, or use it to help rebuild Lytton. I don't know.
It'd be cool to look at, building out a few new satellites. The geography of BC is just not all that conducive to it, but having a fairly quick commuter train in from Squamish would at least help somewhat relieve the pressure on the Vancouver housing market, and make it so not everybody doing the Squamish Vancouver commute has to deal with the highway and the bridges.
Yeah. Well, from trains to pipelines, the kind of provincial national story of the past couple of weeks was the deal that Daniel Smith, Mark Carney, and David Eby came together to announce, which is another pipeline is coming. We don't know who's paying for it. Well, Canada and Alberta are paying for it, apparently. We don't know who's really going to use it, but if you build it, they will drill more oil, I guess. And BC has gotten a sweet, set of incentives to say, we will not fight it this time. And key among them is that the North Coast tanker ban will stay in place, and so this pipeline will be coming down to Vancouver somewhere, but we don't know exactly where. So this pipeline has no route, proponent, or approval, but it's kind of happening.
Yeah, some people did a little digging after this was announced, and some of the background documents, it appears that there is serious consideration for running it out to the soon-to-be expanded, soon's probably the wrong word, the will eventually be expanded Roberts Bank terminal. So in addition to the container and coal freight that goes through there, it would also be a pipeline terminal, which would mean don't have to dredge the harbor to get the ships in and out.
That's a small benefit, at least, in there. For British Columbia's part, we are getting a lot of federal support for projects that were already moving ahead and I thought had federal support, like our LNG Canada terminal up north, the Red Chris mine, the North Coast transmission line, and the ports at Roberts Bank and Prince Rupert and Stewart. I think those latter ones didn't have as much official support, but do now, along with the Major Projects Office referral we'll talk about in a second. Additionally, the George Massey Tunnel twinning is getting $3 billion, which kind of answers the question we had a few weeks ago of what's happening with that, and why does it sound like local politicians out there were worried that it's going to spiral out of costs? Well, federal government's to the rescue.
I mean, all that means is that the costs are going to get borne by someone else, not necessarily that they're growing quite a bit.
I mean, they probably grew quite a bit, just all costs have grown quite a bit. And finally, $600 million for childcare, which will help because we haven't had a serious childcare expansion for a few years. We've kind of we just keep waiting on federal governments to help us do a provincial program here that we started after Quebec. So overall, like a solid win of a day for David Eby. Mark Carney gets to go around, in theory, making it more desirable for Alberta to not vote to separate. Danielle Smith gets to brag that she gets a pipeline, and people in Ontario are looking at orange skies, wondering why we keep burning fossil fuels. Actually, that we didn't put it in the show notes, but there was another pipeline deal announced between Doug Ford, Wab Kinew, Scott Moen.
Not quite.
Alison
Wab
Redford.
Kinew was absent from that press conference.
Oh, was he? I think he didn't oppose it, though.
Yeah, I haven't heard much from him on it, so I don't think he's out there cheering for it, but he's not kicking up a huge stink.
The magic pipeline they're going to build through northern Ontario, all the way down through Muskoka.
Well, you know where the current pipeline goes, right?
I haven't looked recently. It doesn't cut through the States, or is
it does?
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably the rationale behind this one, because we're getting a lot more concerned about Canadian sovereignty for good reason, and you can't exactly have your major east-west pipeline being potentially able to be cut off easily at the whims of a certain person on Pennsylvania Avenue. So in that sense, it does make sense to fully Canadianize the supply chain that powers southern Ontario.
Oh, I get the rationale for it. Just the feasibility and the reality of this thing that has no estimated price tag, timelined, exact route, indigenous support, or really anything else other than a sketch on a napkin of a map is ever going to happen. I think if one of them happens, the BC one will.
Yeah, I think the BC one's further developed in terms of a lot of the conceptual work. There's an existing alignment that it's mostly going to follow. So it's a much lower lift. There was an expansion out all that long ago that went through all the consultations and litigation. So everyone kind of knows the ground on that one and what can reasonably be opposed and what can't. Which is also part of what makes this a good deal for Eby is the BC government wasted a lot of time and money trying to fight the TMX expansion that was futile because pipelines that cross provincial borders are federally regulated and BC constitutionally had no power to stop the thing. So all it did was burn a bunch of provincial money on...
It got them elected, though. It probably, that election was so close that they needed every vote, and it potentially played a role in promising to fight that it helped.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend a lot of time in court on that versus, the symbolic, we're angry about this sort of thing. But, this basically gives Eby an easy out on having to do that stuff to make people happy because there's just a whole bunch of stuff for PC coming in on this that makes a pretty sweet deal, and it's hard to argue. This isn't worth not doing a futile struggle that will surely cost the province money and be an embarrassing court defeat.
For Daniel Smith to get it, for Mark Carney, the best I can fathom is it's kind of just calling Smith's bluff, saying, hey, fine, you want this? You can have it if you can make it happen. To which they
so pipelines are polling like in the 65 to 70% range nationally.
But that doesn't make anyone want to pay to build them, or to use them.
That is
people can go, yeah, sure,
things,
fine.
But it's also does very much fit with the current political mood of we need to get our products to market. We need to get infrastructure built that facilitates trade, and more specifically facilitates trade that is not just in north-south direction. The political winds are behind Carney on this one. It's in addition to the make things less contentious with Alberta and the lead up to the referendum there's a pretty clear just this fits with what the country is asking for at the moment. That makes it an easy move for Carney.
I just wonder how long that's going to last as Ontarians choke on their air. And maybe at some point put 2 and 2 together, but maybe that's asking too much from the median voter to realize fossil fuels are bad. And also, it's really still unclear to me who is actually going to buy this. We have just expanded TMX, and the rest of the world, we're seeing story after story of, massive solar expansions in Pakistan and China, and all these other countries are making shifts. I know that's not immediate, but peak oil is at or near where we're at. And so at some point throwing $40 billion at this, because the best Alberta has managed to shake up is that this Pembina pipeline company is going to take a 10% stake, which is wild that we just have to publicly fund this infrastructure to continue to prop up this dying industry when we could spend $40 billion building solar power in this country and be energy self-sufficient.
I mean, we are also building a lot of that stuff too.
Are we building $40 billion worth of solar?
I don't know necessarily 40 billion, but there's just a big approval, I believe, for offshore wind off the Atlantic coast. That stuff's moving forward. There's a bunch of other various renewable projects underway across the country. It's not like we're not building this and going all in just on oil and gas. And on the who's going to buy this, there's been a lot of allies showed up at Canada's door in the last while asking for a more reliable source than having to get stuff through the Persian Gulf or Russia. And countries across the world are investing in clean energy, but they are also still buying oil and gas. And as long as they are, we're at a point where we could probably use the money on that, because we really need to diversify our trade.
Well, I mentioned the ports that are getting support from the government with this deal. One of the expansions is the Port of Vancouver strategy and the Roberts Point expansion you mentioned, which has been referred to the Major Projects Office. So it looks like that theory of acceleration is being applied to yet one more local project here.
Yeah, this one was just announced today, actually, which I guess answers a few questions. Because when I first looked at the one that was announced back on, was it July 2nd, I believe, for the BC Alberta deal, I had a few questions about things that were left off, and one of them was improving the corridors in and out of the Port of Vancouver facilities, and stuff like this just answers that. So what got unveiled today, in addition to we're pushing this all to the Major Projects Office, is a Port of Vancouver gateway strategy that has 4 parts to it. The big headline one is the Roberts Bank 2 terminal. This is expansion of the Roberts Bank one, the thing you look across the water at when you're getting on and off the ferry at Sawasan, will be a significant expansion to the ability to move containers in and out of BC, as it adds 3 berths to the port there and a significant amount of container yard space. But this is also definitely one of the, we're taking an existing project and putting it through the major projects office rather than picking up something new and starting it from scratch. Because this one has been in the works since, I think, at least 2013, when the initial works and regulatory submissions were put in on this. And I don't know, that just does not exactly fill me with confidence in the ability to get stuff going in the country if it has been already a decade plus and we're still at just going through the regulatory approvals for expanding our port capacity.
It's very funny that when you look at the list of projects for the major projects office, this is at the bottom, along with the Tallston Hydro expansion in Northwest Territories, and the West Coast oil pipeline we just talked about is also at the major projects office. So the Roberts Bank Terminal 2, as you mentioned, very well developed plan. So is LNG Canada 2, that's up there in Kitimat. And then the West Coast oil pipeline, that's like a dream. Still, it's not even got a it's just like some amount of oil should get there. This list really varies from things that are ready to build just about to we're years away, even with the acceleration that they're talking about here. Must be a fun office to work in to deal with such a breadth
I feel like there's
of
a little
projects.
bit of kind of unfair criticism on just like getting hit on for both taking on projects that are already like very well developed rather than bringing new ones up, and also the pipeline one for being too new where not all of the stuff is fully detailed out and there's still a lot of work to do on it though.
I just feel like the pipeline is not at the same it's not at the same stage as any of them, in that it's a draft of a plan.
Yeah, it's probably
I'm
closer
not saying
to
they all
Alto.
need to be finished, right?
Yeah,
but
I think closest to probably Alto in terms of the degree of which it's developed.
But Alto's not on here.
It's one of the ones going through the major projects office.
I got the list right up here. It's not on here.
It might be in the regional strategies thing.
Oh.
They have it two lists on their website.
Of course they do.
But yeah, so that's part one of the strategy circling back. Part two is land use and infrastructure for bulk terminals. Basically, they're looking at expanding the ability to export bulk materials, and as part of that, they want to put a 40-acre port facility in Richmond for the what they're calling the Fraser Wharves terminal site, which is something I didn't even realize was under consideration. I hadn't really heard much about that.
Yeah, me either. I'd be curious where, but I guess there's lots of industrial land along the Fraser River that could be densified, I guess, or have further.
I don't think Richmond actually has a lot in the way of port facilities either.
No.
Like most of them are, Delta, a little bit in Surrey, and then of course Vancouver itself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like old industrial stuff along the
yeah, there's like some marinas by Sea Island Bridge and stuff, but I have no clue where they're talking about. There's some agricultural land as well at the south end of Richmond if they're looking there, or maybe they're going to upgrade the old Britannia shipyards and the historic Steveston Wharfs.
I mean, there's a bunch of industrial area, or some industrial area in South Richmond, but that's also going to be stepping on a landmine because a lot of that is covered in the Cowichan decision.
Yeah, I don't have the map of that either in front of me, but in any case, going up the river is definitely going to raise a lot more attention when those plans start to move forward.
Yeah. And to round out the strategy, they're announcing rail infrastructure optimization expansion, so improving the ability to get freight trains in and out of the port, which is definitely needed. Some of the area around Deltaport's pretty good, but getting through Vancouver in and out of that the port there is a little rough in terms of how the rail infrastructure is set up, and it's definitely a bottleneck. So clearing out those bottlenecks would be good. And finally, there's a environmental protections pillar with protections for the enhanced protections for the southern resident killer whale, a Pacific salmon strategy, and an oceans protection plan. I believe several of those have previously been announced.
Yeah, a couple of that stuff was in the pipeline deal with BC as well. So this is kind of fleshing out, I think, how all of this will roll out. So I guess we'll keep following it because it's going to be a lot of work to expand all of that. Well, let's pivot gears from the government to the opposition. One of the first things that kind of happened in this period was Carney finally made some Senate appointments, and this is something I'd been wondering how he would approach, because Justin Trudeau famously blew up the Liberal caucus in the Senate, kicked them all out, and then as Prime Minister created this independent advisory appointment process that has really transformed the Senate more than anyone else has done since the Senate was kind of created. And my question was always, will that survive Justin Trudeau? And the answer right now is kind of. So Carney doesn't seem to have fully utilized the appointment commission process, because a lot of the people on that are not appointed to do the recommendations. And he has also said he's no longer going to maintain the strict nonpartisan requirement in terms of how people are selected. And so that means that he can choose people who are openly partisan. I think the original intention was, it's not that we can't have partisans, but that you shouldn't be chosen because you're a partisan.
I think in practice, though, it worked that most people who had been involved in partisan politics to one degree or the other generally weren't shortlisted as a result. And that definitely ruffled some feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Carney's gone the other way, and he's just taken a Conservative MP who is sitting in the House of Commons a week ago and is now a senator. That MP that new senator is officially unaffiliated in the Senate. The Conservative caucus has said they would welcome him if he wants. Pierre Poilievre had good things to say about this guy. Richard Martel, former MP for Chicoutimi-Lafjord, who had held that seat since 2018. The margins he won by has actually been shrinking, and it was a three-way race in the last election. And so now we're getting a by-election in a competitive Ontario seat. How convenient for Mark Carney.
Quebec seat.
Quebec. Jesus, I'm so tired. So how convenient for Mark Carney to get one more by-election in Quebec in the coming months. Avi Lewis may not be running in that because he has ruled out running in all by-elections. He hasn't given a formal reason, as far as I can tell, other than focus on, building the party. I think the obvious reason is none of these by-elections are winnable for the NDP at this point.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be embarrassed by losing a by-election.
I mean, kind of fair enough. Eventually you got to do it, but clock is ticking.
The longer he stays out, the more questions it's going to draw. And fair to, people sometimes pass on the first one that comes up, but the longer that goes on, the more it becomes a story about why won't he get into the House of Commons. So not a problem yet, but could be.
Yeah, it was the same kind of issue that Jagmeet Singh faced early on as well.
He also halved his caucus in the following election, so it's not a great strategy in terms of just what the historical record is on that one.
It's not clear anyone could have done better.
But yeah, on the appointment by Carney on this one, I kind of love this move. It's just such raw politics on it in a way that's just amusing to watch. So not only does he embarrass Pierre Poilievre by causing him to lose another MP after he's already lost a few, but he does it in a way that manages to look bipartisan and magnanimous. because he's extending a hand to the outgoing MP who's now going to be a senator. It looks like he's not worried about having some different ideas in the Senate, but it also costs him nothing because the Senate is like overwhelmingly full of maybe not capital L partisan liberals, but like that appointments committee like pretty much picked people that all thought in line with where the Liberal Party was, and there's not a whole lot of ideological diversity in the Senate as a result. So like he basically has a Senate that is full of liberal-ish people in there. So like one conservative in there isn't going to change anything at all. So it costs him basically nothing on it. It's just like such a masterstroke. I kind of love it. And not only that, because all the focus was on the appointment of a conservative, the fact that he appointed a former advisor to the Senate just basically escaped notice.
Yeah, someone who actually, like, that was the other partisan appointment, Tom Pitfield, who was on his campaign team and was principal secretary in his office. Those are the kind of patronage appointments we never liked back in the day, or that a lot of people would criticize back in the day, and that Trudeau's approach neutered a lot of, in I think, a pretty positive way. And this kind of, I'm going to use appointments as political wedge tools, it takes the Senate back to what it used to be a little bit. Now, Carney has said he's going to go back to a more Trudeau-style appointment process where it is a little bit more open.
I believe he also filled a vacancy on the appointments committee.
One of many that were on there.
So it's not like he's abandoning it, but
yeah,
he's doing some work to keep that going.
So we'll keep an eye on that. The Senate as a whole, I wouldn't say like they're progressive-minded. I think most of the appointments were. They created headaches for both Trudeau and have already pushed back on some of Carney's legislation. So I wouldn't say they are like partisan hacks. And I think that pushback they have offered on various bills has generally been for Canadians' benefit, right? To give some sober second thought to things in ways that isn't just partisan, like, we don't like it because you did it situation. That said, the Liberal Senate representative has said maybe Carney will appoint more conservatives in the future to beef up their ranks because it's good to have an official opposition. And that really appeals to the, like, I don't even know what the type is, but there's a, like, Carney sycophant that's like, oh, he's doing these brilliant moves all the time and they defend every move he makes. Even when you're like, aren't those contradictory to, like, they're like liberal hacks who just like him for being a liberal, but he's doing conservative things. Like appointing conservatives.
Even some of that, though, like some of the Carney pushback or reaction, I think, is come because people forget that the Liberal Party used to be a lot more like this before the Trudeau years. But yeah, he's also definitely from like much more of like the Paul Martin wing of the party, such as it existed, which had kind of gone extinct, and he has revived.
Well, the last prime minister, at least, to appoint someone from another party or across party was Brian Mulroney, according to news reports. Just an interesting little bit of trivia there. Although I think one senator from the 90s, appointed by maybe Chrétien or Martin, was like an NDP affiliated person, and when they got to the Senate, they couldn't sit as the NDP because the NDP doesn't have a Senate caucus or want one, and so they were just an independent progressive for a while. But yeah, I guess we'll see if more conservatives get named and if the Senate Conservative Caucus grows. Of course, the worst thing for the conservatives would be to win a majority government and then face a Senate that like is very much not their party.
Yeah. So, if anything, that might not be the worst thing for the Conservatives, depending on how many of them get picked up from the House caucus, because that would definitely be a problem for them. But yeah, I'm actually kind of like this idea, because it wouldn't hurt to have slightly wider range of views, get more representation in the Senate.
There's like 5 different groups. They're a lot of independents, but
yeah, they
have
caucus in different groups. But
yeah,
the appointments under Trudeau were fairly similar in worldview, and just getting a little more variety in there wouldn't be the worst thing. Because it's like not, we're pretty far away from changing the actual definitive vote, the swing vote on anything. But having those voices would probably be good.
Or we could just abolish the Senate finally. But that would take a lot more work than I think Carney's going to do.
Yeah, I get why Carney does not want to touch anything constitutional at the moment. There is enough to occupy a government for, well, frankly, more time than they've got. But I do kind of get the sense that probably within the next 20 years or so, constitutional reform's going to make a comeback, and there will be another serious kick at the can on it.
Well, just the last thing we should touch on is how rough of a couple weeks it's been for Pierre Poilievre. Obviously, losing a caucus member to the Senate doesn't help. They had a report out about their fundraising. I don't think it's actually that interesting. It's basically they just spent a lot of money last year. So they actually did have a deficit last year, but like they could be in the positive if they just slowed their advertising 10%, and they'd still be outspending everyone.
Yeah, the bigger problem is that hasn't actually landed them anything.
Yeah, and that has led to infighting. And the best I heard it described is like Poilievre tried his nice guy transformation for a little bit. It didn't get anywhere, so he got bored of it, and now he's right back to who can I yell at? And at the Stampede, it turns out that's indirect swipes at Corey Teneycke and Christine Elliott and Caroline Elliott for being liberals.
Which the only real swipe on Elliott on that one is that she hired Teneycke, which the guy
who is not a liberal.
Yeah, the guy is no liberal. Like, not even close on it. He was Stephen Harper's, communications director. Like,
and I think he worked for Sun News.
Yeah, has run multiple conservative campaigns for, like, prominent conservatives.
Doug Ford.
Like, I get the fact that Doug Ford is, in many ways, not particularly conservative, and that, like, annoys some people.
In that he can win.
But, like, the guy wins, which is more than you can say for Poilievre. Doug Ford, even if it is, like, a watered-down version of what Pierre Poilievre wants, is at least getting to put that stuff into practice, which is more than Skippy can say on that. But, yeah, anyway, there's a little bit of bad blood between the Ford camp and the Poilievre camp, and it's one thing for that to be kind of some backroom tensions on that stuff, but to like spill it out in the open here is just like sloppy, unprofessional. It's like clear their focus is in the wrong spot, and that Pierre Poilievre just like doesn't have the discipline to actually stick with any other strategy than the only one he actually wants to run.
Well, and I think it's trickling through the whole conservative movement right now, where they're just in a complete, chaos situation. Luc Lebrun from Press Progress, obviously no friend of the conservatives, posted on Blue Sky the other day 4 screenshots of just like conservatives fighting on X, and not just no ones, but like Jason Kenney going at and Ben Woodfidden calling people out. The account Brittany and Katie Merrifield arguing with each other, Anthony Koch and Shooter McGavin arguing and calling other people fake conservatives and so forth.
And just like for the record, Anthony Koch and Ben Woodfidden both worked for Pierre Poilievre at one point or another.
Yeah.
And like Ben, and I think both of them worked on the Elliott campaign too. So like indirectly there were swipes at them. I think Ben's has been particularly combative. It's actually had a pretty thoughtful piece out today on the kind of state of things. But yeah, just like taking swipes at former staff members because they also worked with a staffer you don't like on another campaign is just kind of shitty.
And it's just all out in the open, too. Like,
yeah.
There's usually some gripes in DMs and private chats and over beers, but it's such a, like, bad situation in conservative politics in Canada at this point that they're just open civil war.
Yeah, and this is, like, the thing that I'm seeing is actually starting to track Pierre's armor among conservatives, because he's generally enjoyed fairly high approval ratings, but there's definitely starting to be a reaction to the stuff in the last couple weeks of, I don't know, this guy's kind of losing it a little bit. Like, are we sure he's the right person to carry things forward? And it's not into a like rebellion or move to unseat him yet, but it's a lot more vulnerable and a lot weaker than he has been at any point since he became leader.
Well, and you still have a lot of people, you don't have any natural successors in the wings, but it seems like Jason Kenney is trying to position himself for something. Undoubtedly, people like Jamil Javani in caucus are eager to run a populist campaign.
Oh, yeah, it's an open secret that Javani's aiming to be the successor. But, I mean, that's also part of the problem is it has been such a one-man show that there is nobody that's like a clear next person in line or even an obvious choice to take the party forward if Pierre Poilievre's no longer the person to do that. There's not been enough work on improving the talent across the board in the party, and that's a problem.
And that has been Politicoast. Find links to everything we talked about at politicoast.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicoast. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicoast is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.